Now, a story told by the founder of Twitter has offered a rare insight into how Mark Zuckerberg's mind works, and it's a weird story. Jack Dorsey recently recounted a night 8 years ago when he went around to Zuckerberg's house for dinner, only to be presented with a goat that the billionaire had killed himself.
Stick with us. Now, Zuckerberg said he would only eat meat from animals that he had killed himself. So as a result, 5 goats were out the back when Jack Dorsey arrived, and 1 was in the oven. Zuckerberg's view was one of personal responsibility, that people shouldn't detach their dinner from the fact that it actually used to be alive.
Yeah, an admirable point, sure. But remember that this is the CEO of Facebook, a company that has been slammed for its repeated breaches of corporate responsibility. So does this weird story from Jack Dorsey prove how different people's work and home philosophies can be? For tonight's Taking Stock, we're joined by Jack Delosa, founder of The Entourage and host of Entrepreneurs right here on Your Money, and Shane Oliver, chief economist at AMP Capital. Thank you both for being with us. So a pretty weird story, but yeah, possibly an insight into Mark Zuckerberg's mind. Jack, what did you think?
This one is weird for even me. I mean, I think I'm here most weeks defending entrepreneurs. I'm really finding it difficult to find the angle on this one.
We dug deep to find one for you tonight. We did.
I am stumped. I'm officially stumped. It's weird, right? For me, it strikes of kind of like eccentric billionaire-esque type behaviour. I guess that's all one can put it down to. I mean, I do challenge the link to a lack of corporate responsibility, and I will go out on a limb and kind of defend Zuckerberg in that context. You know, they've obviously been slammed for a lot of privacy stuff, which we've discussed several times, and my views are quite clear on that. But, you know, Facebook are the first business of their kind in the world. They've got a community of a couple of billion people. They're online. They move faster than regulation can. It's inevitable that they're going to hit a lot of tricky hurdles along the way and get themselves into trouble along the way. So I don't see that as being negligent or irresponsible on Zuckerberg's part. I think, you know, the first Indian gets the arrows, and I think that's what continues to happen to Facebook a lot of the time. And so I don't see them as corporately irresponsible. I can appreciate his sentiments around wanting to kill the meat you eat from a responsibility perspective, but that is still weird.
It's weird, wasn't it? It was like one step away from him hunting them in the backyard with crossbows.
Yeah, whatever. It's weird, especially if you turn up as a dinner guest and you're not expecting it. I mean, that's the weird part of the story.
I do wonder whether there was any sort of power play going on with Jack Dorsey. You know, I've killed this goat that you're eating, Jack.
That's
I've had blood on my hands this evening.
Admittedly, when I first read it, I was a bit grossed out.
Yeah.
This idea, and I think Jack Dorsey was as well. But I think Jack Dorsey summed it up pretty well when he said that often people come along to him and say, I love eating pork, but I don't like the idea of that little pork pig was running around alive a little while ago. And he pointed out that you have to take responsibility for what you eat. And this is one way of doing that. And you also have to be thankful. And no doubt he probably would have been thankful because he would have been conscious that that animal only a little while ago was alive. So I kind of don't like the idea of killing animals myself. But that very thought of not liking the idea of killing another sentient being has made me want to eat less of them. And when I do eat them, I eat as sparingly as possible. I don't want to waste anything, but it is increasingly pushing me in the direction of vegetarianism.
Yeah, right.
And I think that also it fits in with an ethical view of the world, but it also fits in with an environmental view of the world. There's a recent study that showed if we reduced our consumption of meat by 50% and increased our consumption of fruit and vegetables by 50%, we'd all be better off health-wise, and the world would be better off in terms of carbon emissions. So all this stuff fits together, so I would have to commend. Overall, I think he's doing a great thing. And so by the time I get into the story, I thought, this is good. This is good.
After you get over the shock factor.
It's a good sentiment.
I think everyone's imagining being a dinner guest and arriving, he says, hang on, I've just killed a goat. Excuse me?
No, apparently it does.
Just going to crack open a red wine here or something.
Exactly, God. What did you think about the idea that possibly it points to some ethical mindset that he has that maybe hasn't been able to be applied effectively to Facebook?
I agree with Jack here that sometimes when you're in a company, these things can happen along the way that you're not necessarily conscious of, and now he probably is, but this tells me that there is a strong ethical principle in Mark Zuckerberg's mind. Now, I used to question that, which is why I don't actually use Facebook, but I use Twitter. You know, after watching what was that film made of
The social
Yep.
I was kind of wondering about the ethics of this whole place, but hearing this, it's given me a different perspective. I've actually got a more favourable view now of Mark Zuckerberg than I had before I read that story a few hours ago.
There you go. Thank you. Well, we've seen a Boeing flying car that will one day whisk us over those traffic jam streets we battle every day in our capital cities, dodging the skyscrapers. Today, it took a giant leap closer to reality. In a test flight, Boeing's prototype took off, hovered briefly in the air, and then landed. It's set to revolutionise urban travel. The video coming up, there it is. Rising, hovering, and then returning to Earth. They're still yet to do the horizontal movement, so that's kind of the next phase of this. Can you imagine being whisked around? Is this how you imagine getting around in the not too distant future, guys?
I can, yeah, I think this is the way we're going to go, but that thing looks like it's got a lot of work to do on it yet. It does look
It's a bit jerky, wasn't it? I felt
it's
it was a
not
bit
the sort of thing I saw in the Jetsons when I was 10 or something. Yeah, it is the way we're going to go. But obviously with autonomous vehicles, there's a lot to be worked out there, and there's a hell of a lot of stuff to work out here. But yeah, we will get there.
Yeah.
I do think this is a core part of future transport. I think it's a little bit away. I do know, Elon Musk has said on several occasions, if he did have the time, if he did have the bandwidth, what he would create is a vertical takeoff jet that was electricity powered. And so I think there's a need for it. I think there's a market for it, particularly in a car sort of scenario. But I think we're probably like a 10-year time horizon away from seeing any real consumer application.
But still, that's so exciting, isn't it? Because for our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, it was always about the flying car. And we're all going to be alive when that happens.
Yeah, totally.
Someone in the office
love it. You
today
said
said...
Jetsons.
There was
So
a film,
cool.
James Bond, Man with the Golden Gun. There's a flying car in that film, and they were actually going to have a flying car, but it turned out to be too dangerous, so they
Yes.
they used the model. But
Right.
that film did have the concept of flying car there, and made me think I need a flying car just like that one.
Yeah, see, that dream's been
soon
alive
you'll
for
be able to.
years. Okay? That dream's been alive. Someone in the office today said, I'll be so disappointed if I die before I see a flying car. I
It's something to live
It's
for.
going to happen in my lifetime.
Exactly.
Yeah, we were laughing
It's
about that
the
word.
Jetsons.
I know.
Here we are. Right. But one more thing to talk about tonight, which is that meetings are, of course, the bane of many people's work lives. Do you find yourself in a heap of useless meetings? I'm betting some of you are nodding your heads at home. Well, Anthony Mitchell from Ben Delta has written 7 meeting rules to follow. They include never more than 7 people, interesting, never longer than an hour. In fact, stand up to make sure everyone knows exactly what the outcome of the meeting is meant to be. So, some interesting tips there. Jack, any firm tips on meetings? I'm sure you have a few yourself.
I actually agree with all of those that are on the screen right now.
Standing in meetings? Do you like that one?
Well,
I've never heard
I
of that
personally
before.
don't, because I'd rather be sitting. But I like the principle, in that it means that everybody hurries up. You
Yes.
don't sit down and get comfortable and...
Or lazy.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So, I don't like committee-type thinking. And so I think, under 7 people, under 5... Like, less people, the better. Okay. You need to have a very clear outcome for the meeting. I think the way that you elicit input and contribution from everybody in the room is really important. And we operate on a basis, everybody has a vote, everybody has a voice but not a vote. And so whoever is in charge of making whatever we're discussing, whoever's in charge of making it happen, the decision lies with them. And so we're not going to end up with compromise of 6 different opinions. Everybody's going to have input, but whoever's responsible for delivering the outcome, they're responsible for making the decision, make the decision, move on.
It's fascinating. Shane?
I hate meetings. I literally hate them. And the worst thing is when you have a day where you come into the office and all you do is have meetings, and then I think I've got nothing done. So there's several tips I would say. Firstly, when you're scheduling meetings, make sure your little gadget that you enter the meeting into will default to, say, 15 minutes or 30 minutes, rather than default to, say, an hour.
Yes.
Secondly, try and avoid them. If it can be resolved on the phone, I know people don't like using the phone these days, maybe on the phone or WhatsApp, whatever, do it that way. I love the point of having the purpose. I also like having the idea of a strong chairperson who's responsible. The worst meetings are those ones where everyone gets a say and the chairperson's just going umming and ahhing, and you never get to a decision, and you're trying to be democratic, and wants to be democratic, or she wants to be democratic, but they just can't, the group can't. Someone has to be accountable for taking the decision.
And what do you reckon of this idea of no more than 7 people? In fact, 5 is best, because Jeff Bezos has the rule of the 2 pizzas. He said you never call a meeting unless you can feed everyone in the room with just 2 pizzas. So that's got to be that small.
Totally agree with that.
It's a good rule.
The time taken rises exponentially with the number of people you've got.
Yeah.
So 7, 5 is probably optimal.
That's
Okay, some excellent tips there. I really like all those. We're going to have to implement them right here at Your Money. But,
that was one thing we forgot.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So we were talking before about the fateful goat dinner, which apparently was gross, by the way. He said that it was cold and not very delicious. But it got us thinking and talking, Brooke, didn't it? About, you know, it's a classic question. Someone, doesn't matter if they're dead or alive, but some famous person that you'd really love to sit down and have dinner with. Shane, what do you think?
I thought a lot about that. Paul McCartney.
Ooh, okay.
And the reason, maybe it reflects my age, because he was a hero of mine when I was young, and it was Wings. I'll admit to Wings. I'm a bit smashy about these things, Kylie and all that sort of stuff. But as opposed to Beatles, but then I got into Beatles. But the thing I like about Paul McCartney is whenever he talks, he's interviewed, he gives a really thoughtful answer. And his interest spans over a whole range of things, but one thing is quite important. He's vegetarian, and he was a huge supporter of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
Yes.
So I reckon if I had dinner with him, it would be vegetarian,
lot to talk about.
and I would have learned a hell of a lot of stuff about the Beatles and everything that's gone on ever since.
Yep, and there'd be no need to kill any goat.
And there'd be no need to kill any goat or any animal at all.
Bonus, Jack?
Dead or alive, I would have to choose Steve Jobs. And that might throw up, so, you know, some people have certain judgments of Jobs and his leadership style, and some of them are warranted. But, you know, the reason I really admire Jobs is he was a deeply spiritual person. He spent a number of years in India before he ever started Apple, so he meditated a lot, was very connected, so to speak. And when he started out, he wasn't great in business. You know, when he was 28, 29, 30, he wasn't a good executive. And he went on, and by the time he was sort of, you know, what was he in his 60s, he was building the world's best products, and Apple became the most valuable company in the world, you know, shortly before he passed. And so I view him as an incredible human who contributed a lot and had a very effective stance on leadership and building companies.
Love that.
I was going to say Steve Jobs too. I think you're absolutely right. What a fascinating person to sit down with.
Exactly.
And sort of, some has been said that he's a bit of a strange guy. It'd be interesting to find out if that's true.
Yes.
That's cool.
What he's
he
like.
Might cook our lamb that night.
Maybe, maybe. Also,
kill our lamb that night.
Well, maybe. Who knows? But just to be able to sit down with somebody who has changed the world that much.
Oh, I wasn't thinking that deeply, unfortunately.
Go on, Brooke.
I was thinking John Candy.
I was not expecting that. That's awesome.
The first person that came to mind, because as a kid, my sisters and we used to watch all the John Candy movies, and I think we watched Uncle Buck most weekends.
Right. That's a good
and I would just want him to sit at dinner and just quote all the lines, and we would just sit there and laugh ourselves
Brooke,
silly.
I back you so hard on this. It's Cool Runnings is my favourite movie of all time. I'm so behind that.
Anyway, yes, I just go down memory lane with Uncle Buck, and my sisters. As long as I could invite my sisters, I wouldn't just want to be there alone. Thank you so much, Shane. Thank you very much, and Jack.
Thank you
great to have you guys as always.